Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're skipping the usual agenda slide because, honestly, we've got something incredibly profound to dig into right away. We're going to jump straight into an ancient text that, surprisingly enough, speaks directly to the exhaustion, the anxiety, and the burnout so many of us are dealing with right now. We're going to look at a very familiar story, but through a completely new, deeply theological lens. And I can promise you, it's really going to change how you view your own life. Let me ask you something. Does it ever feel like the world is just run by hostile, chaotic systems that you absolutely cannot defeat? It's a very modern kind of angst, isn't it? It's that terrifying, exhausting feeling that we're completely overwhelmed by corrupt powers, systemic issues, and these dehumanizing corporate or social ladders that literally just drain us dry. We end up feeling isolated, overworked, and totally disconnected. But believe it or not, ancient scripture actually offers a profound diagnosis for this exact feeling of modern alienation. In our analysis today, we're going to call this state of existence the backroom. I want you to imagine the sleek, shadowy, endless corridors of modern corporate life, or maybe just the endless doom scroll of digital isolation. You see, the backroom isn't really a physical place. It's an existential exile. It's a state of mindless routine, total loneliness, and a complete loss of what makes us truly human. It's exactly what happens when we get drained by the chaotic, hostile systems of the world and just find ourselves spiritually homeless. Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1, the architecture of exile. We're going to be looking at Luke chapter 15. You probably know it as the famous parable of the prodigal son. But we really need to reframe this. This isn't just some simplistic, moralistic kid's tale about a boy who runs away and then says he's sorry. No, this is a massive, cosmic narrative about surviving the hostile systems of the world. It's basically a masterclass in the architecture of human exile and how we end up in those backrooms I just mentioned. Entering a backroom always starts with one thing, and that is distorted perception. Now, the biblical definition of perception isn't just about cognitive awareness. It's about how we interpret reality based on the orientation of our hearts, not just the objective facts. The great, exhausting lie that traps us is this belief that autonomy from the Father somehow equals true freedom. We start to believe that putting distance between us and our Creator will actually bring fulfillment. And that right there is exactly the deception that builds the walls of our exile. This brings us to part 2, the backroom of rebellion. To really see how this works, let's take a look at the younger son first. His path into the backroom is defined by open immorality, a relentless pursuit of absolute independence, and a progressive descent into geographical and spiritual exile. He mistakenly perceives his father's house as a restriction, right? So he decides to make a break for it. And his descent follows a very distinct pattern. First, he demands autonomy. And this leads directly to what theologians call the wealth illusion doctrine. This is an absolutely crucial concept. The younger son believes that material wealth can independently secure his identity and his happiness. He basically mistakes financial liquidity for true security. He thinks his inheritance is just capital for self-expression, instead of seeing it as a resource meant to serve a covenant relationship, a committed family bond. And this massive illusion plunges him straight into spiritual bankruptcy. This quote right here really reveals the ultimate tragedy of his perception. He says, "Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me." He's demanding the gift while entirely rejecting the giver. In heavenly courtroom terms, this kind of bold, imperative demand is known as a presumption. He's acting entirely on human self-reliance without seeking any divine counsel. And this presumption creates a massive legal and spiritual vulnerability, effectively handing him right over to those hostile systems of the world we were talking about. What follows next is what we call a decreational cataclysm. Basically, his very human nature starts breaking down. The son doesn't just lose his money, he loses his humanity. He experiences what we can call the animalization of humanity. He ends up enslaved to a foreign citizen, sent to feed ceremonially unclean swine, and eventually, he's even envying the pig's food. It's the ultimate reversal of the Genesis mandate. Instead of exercising dominion over creation, he's completely mastered by it, reduced to nothing more than mere biological survival. Moving on to part 3, the backroom of religion. Now, what's really interesting about this explainer is that it doesn't stop there, because there are 2 sons in this story. Shifting our focus to the older son introduces a truly shocking paradigm-shifting idea. You can be completely exiled without ever leaving home. You can literally be lost in the backroom right in the middle of the church, or right in the middle of doing everything correctly. Notice the profound juxtaposition here. The younger son is geographically far and in open rebellion, but the older son is geographically near, yet spiritually bankrupt, and completely trapped in self-righteous religion. So despite their totally different outward behaviors, they share the exact same internal corruption. Neither of them actually wants the father himself. Both of them are treating their relationship with the father as a pure transaction. Just listen to the older brother's complaint here. Look, these many years I have served you. The Greek word he uses here is douleo, which literally translates to slave, or to perform the duties of a servant. This exposes a massive internal crisis. He isn't using the language of sonship at all. He possesses the legal title of a royal heir, sure, but he has the exact psychology of an employee. He views his relationship purely as a contractual servitude, governed entirely by merit and reward. So he inhabits what our sources beautifully call Eden without communion. He never physically leaves the father's estate, which symbolically represents Eden, but his distorted transactional perception completely transforms paradise into a burden. He's trapped in this invisible prison of legalism, comparison, and deep resentment. He's doing all the right things on paper, but he is completely alienated from the father's joy. He is absolutely stuck in the backroom of religion. Let's look at part 4, the father's divided life. So, we have these two profound forms of human lostness. How on earth do we escape? We need a system breaker. We need something that completely shatters both the transactional rebellion of the younger son and the transactional legalism of the older son. And that brings us to the father's radical response. When the younger son makes his initial demand, the Greek text says the father divides his bios. Now, bios doesn't just mean money. It literally translates to life, or the resources by which life is sustained. By dividing his bios, the father isn't just writing a check or liquidating a quick asset. He's literally allowing his very life to be torn apart. He willingly absorbs the agonizing fracture of his own identity and embraces immense personal loss, just to honor his son's agency. It's a breathtaking act of profound self-emptying sacrifice. Which brings us to part 5, Hesed, love that runs. This sacrifice perfectly sets the stage for the climax of the rescue. We're introduced to the ultimate system-breaking force in the universe. That force is captured in this incredibly profound Hebrew word, Hesed. Hesed is steadfast, covenantal love. It's a commitment that flat-out refuses to abandon the beloved, even when the beloved has completely broken the covenant. You see, Hesed isn't just a warm emotion. It's love in action. It's a love that pursues before it waits. And as we see when the father physically runs to his returning son, it's a love that restores before it rewards. Let's contrast this with the world's exhausting systems for a second. In the ancient Mediterranean world, and honestly in our corporate world today, human honor protects its reputation. But Hesed bears public shame. Human honor demands a probationary period to earn back trust. Hesed restores immediately. Human honor constantly asks, what will people think? But Hesed asks, what will redeem my child? The father literally lifts his robes and runs publicly. To put that in perspective, in the ancient Middle East, older, dignified men simply did not run. It was deeply, deeply shameful to bare your legs like that. But he sacrifices his own dignity to intercept his son's disgrace. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute core of the Christian gospel. Hesed never denies justice. Rather, it bears the cost of justice in order to accomplish reconciliation. The father's willingness to just absorb the financial loss, the emotional suffering, and the massive social disgrace to bring his son home perfectly anticipates Christ voluntarily laying down his own life and bearing the total cost of our rebellion on the cross. Part 6, Restored Vision and Communion. Experiencing this level of radical, system-breaking grace is really the only thing that can heal our distorted perception. Whether we're exhausted from chasing autonomous wealth out in the far country, or we're completely burned out from trying to earn our worth through religious perfection, encountering the Father's Hesed is the only thing that can pull us out of our modern backrooms. And the father's immediate response to the younger son totally proves this. He doesn't make him a servant. He gives him the robe, which immediately covers his shame. He gives him the ring, which restores his authority, and he gives him sandals, which restore his freedom. These aren't just nice little welcome home gifts. They are immediate, system-breaking symbols of a fully restored human vocation and identity. Grace literally clothes him before his shame can even speak. And then the father throws a feast, the sacred banquet. In biblical theology, meals actually create sacred space. So this isn't just a party to celebrate. It's the ultimate reclamation of true relational fellowship. It completely replaces the isolation, the hunger, and the starvation of the backroom with a joyful, abundant communion of the Father's table. Isolation finally gives way to family. But we have to remember, there's still a second son standing outside refusing to come in. And what does the father do? He leaves the feast a second time. Think about that. He ran down the road earlier to intercept the immoral rebel, and now he leaves his own party to plead with the moral religious rule keeper. God's grace relentlessly seeks out both. He pursues the lost in the pigsty, for sure, but he also pursues the lost sitting right there in the pews. The Father in this story is the living revelation of God. Mercy isn't just some exception to his character, it literally is his character. If grace, this relentless pursuing, system-breaking hesed we've been talking about, is God's true character, how does that change the way you see your own exhaustion, your own burnout, and your own exile? It's time to step out of the exhausting systems of the backrooms and finally accept the Father's invitation to come home. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.